Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, Insider, Indianapolis Star. This is your tour diary, I guess, for August 10th. It's Sunday. Things are admittedly starting to wind down a little bit here in Puerto Rico. Indiana's only got the one game left Monday morning at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning at the Coliseo Guillermo Angulo, where they played their first game here. That game will be against Mega Superbet again. First of all, as always, please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. This thing is growing for us, and it's, I think, something that is probably going to become an even more sort of ever-present part of our sort of content profile going forward through football season, through basketball season. So please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Really appreciate everybody who's come over here. I've tried to get involved some in the comments in between filing stories and eating some really tasty Puerto Rican cuisine, but really appreciate everyone who's followed along. Wanted to today, I've done this with. I want to do something a little bit different today because we talked a lot last night about Indiana's comeback against Mega Superbet, and I encourage you, if you haven't already, go watch a video from last night. Go check out my insider from the Coliseo Roberto Clemente. Check out, I already have one story up today on Alexa Ristich, who's kind of been thrown in the fire here and done, I think, pretty well, all things considered. Small sample size, but all things considered, in his first few days as a Hoosier. Going to write later today on Lamar Wilkerson. Wanted to do something a little bit different and just kind of almost go player by player in terms of some reactions and just some thoughts over these first two games. And I won't go crazy in depth with it, but just I'm literally just going to kind of go down the box score here. So essentially go down numerically. I've done this after both of the first two games as sort of our immediate sort of reaction piece. Sometimes we do 3 reasons. Sometimes we do player ratings. Because fans don't really know these guys too terribly well, I've been trying to almost just give like player-by-player reactions, just thoughts, a few sentences on each player from each of these first two games, and I'll do it again tomorrow. But I wanted to kind of give you just a little, I don't know, some first blush thoughts on each of essentially the players that we've seen out here for Indiana. So numerically, we'll start with Josiah Miles. I thought he had a better game against Mega than he did against Central Universidad de Bayamón. I thought he was kind of struggling to figure out exactly where to engage with the game against Bayamón. He was only 1 of 5 against Mega, but he had 8 rebounds. I thought he really came up really stepped up defensively and on the glass when Indiana needed to, because Indiana was giving up size to Mega, and that's probably going to be a theme for Indiana at times this season. I thought Miles played bigger in about 15 minutes than his frame, and I thought it was really important for Indiana because, those 8 rebounds and 3 fouls drawn, I think, when you talk about Indiana sort of starting to tilt the direction of that game back, a big part of it was taking away Mega's ability to leverage its size and its reach advantage. I thought Miles was good there. Still think his offensive game will probably come along, but I think he's going to be a player that Indiana fans will see a lot of early in the season. Reed Bailey, I thought, had some really good moments against Mega. Some moments, too, where he struggled a little bit. He was 4 of 9 from the floor, 8 points, 5 rebounds, but he had one of the highest plus-minuses on the team. The only player who had a higher one is Lamar Wilkerson. Bailey was plus 23, and in both of these games, you have seen moments, flashes, when, especially like in transition or taking the ball in ball screen situations, Bailey shows a really unnatural ability to handle the ball and attack the basket for a big. And if he can couple that, his teammates have been kind of pushing him to shoot even a little bit more in pick and pop situations, driving kick situations. If he can couple, some of that sort of almost like guard skill in a big's body to the ability to knock down some shots, I think that makes him a really dangerous piece for this team. Maybe not necessarily like the highest usage rate on the team, but I think a very dangerous piece. Lamar Wilkerson was excellent on Saturday night. He was, I think, 3 of 14 against Bayamón, and Darian DeVries basically said, I'll live with it because, if he has a bad shooting night, I know a good one's just around the corner, and this was one. He was 7 of 11 from the floor, 4 of 7 from behind the three-point line. Again, led Indiana plus 24 in the plus-minus. 18 points was a co-game high. Asim Julovic from Mega Superbet was the only player who scored that many points. And you could see Wilkerson's just sort of natural scoring ability coming to the fore in this game. He had some really good catch-and-shoot threes. he also just, you could see just there's a smoothness to his offensive game when he gets into certain rhythms, like routines, like a ball fake and drive. He's got a really good pull-up jumper. He is just a scorer, and his teammates clearly know it. They try to find him with the ball because of it. He had some really important baskets and a couple good defensive moments as well in the second half turnaround in this game. And you can see why Wilkerson was such a coveted player in the portal. Sam Alexis was another one that I thought was really important in this game. He brought some energy in that Bayamon game off the bench. I think it was even more tangible here because Indiana was really kind of struggling with the size that Mega was throwing at them. Alexis finished with 13 and 8. He had a block or two in there as well. And just, Indiana posted him up a little bit more than it did against Bayamon. That's probably not a long-term plan. But, at the same time, showing the ability to tilt a game where Indiana's struggling maybe for some size concerns. Obviously, a guy like Alexis wasn't going to get tested a lot against Bayamon because he's just bigger, longer, more athletic than basically anybody else on the floor, certainly on the other side. But I think he was really important. And if you are Indiana and you're starting to think about how are we gonna handle it when teams kind of try to outsize us, this is a game where I think you can reach back with Sam Alexis and sort of give him some encouragement. Quieter night for Connor Enright. 6 points, missed both of his field goal attempts, did make all 3 of his free throws, fouled out in the third quarter in part because he got whistled for a technical foul. He got shouldered to the ground in transition, which was called for an intentional foul. That's an international rules thing. And he got up and got right in the face of the player who'd done it, who was several inches taller than him. And I think obviously Indiana won't want guys fouling out, won't want guys getting techs, but I thought, I thought Enright set a bit of a tone as much as you could sort of, evaluate that against Bayamon, and I thought that was a moment to just sort of say, like, nobody's pushing us around. You can play physical, but we're gonna come right back at you. And I thought there was value in that, even if it did kind of abbreviate his night. Tatum Conaway played almost 21 minutes, 12 points, 5 assists, had some foul trouble. He had, I think he had just the one steal. I'm looking at the box over here, and he had 6 turnovers. There were some moments when he was gambling defensively, and I think he was trying for steals that wound up leading to fouls. I think the turnovers are probably more a function of Indiana really early on, especially struggling to figure out how to navigate the physicality that Mega was being allowed to play with. And there were times where Conaway looked really frustrated, but then there were also some times, particularly once Indiana was kind of in the ascendancy in the game, when he looked absolutely sort of just kind of in control, like he had the game on a string. He was dictating the pace. He was dictating the flow. And once Indiana really flipped the momentum, you felt like Conaway was, as much as anyone other than the players scoring the ball, and of course he's a point guard, he doesn't always need to score the ball. Sometimes it's about putting others in position to do it. He was the one driving that momentum forward, and I thought, he had a real sort of game of two halves, not in terms of maybe just his like his literal statistics, but the way that he played, his frustration in the game in the first half, his control of the game in the second half, I thought was impressive. Quieter night for Josh Harris, didn't play until closer to the end. I think that was probably down to the fact that Mega just had more size. Obviously, if you're Indiana, you're going to have to help Harris as he goes along, learn to mitigate some of that size, because he is, more of a 4, really, and maybe he can develop some perimeter skills as time goes on, but he is kind of a smaller 4 right now. But I also just think, listen, he's one of the younger players on the team. He's only a sophomore, so you're not as worried about that development. Another night where Trent Sisley plays as many minutes almost in, but the only player, he played the most minutes Wednesday night. The only Hoosier who played more minutes last night was Tucker DeVries. Sisley scored 10 points, made a couple more threes, 5 rebounds. Another player who I thought really seemed to kind of embrace how physically the game was being played. At one point he got tied up by a Mega player that they were sort of hand fighting. The Mega player tied him up and tried to pull him down to draw a foul. And the referee didn't buy it, saw that the Mega player had pulled Sisley to the ground and called the offensive foul, and Sisley kind of barked something at him as if to sort of say, like, yeah, you're not getting away with that. And I think, I'll say what I've said about Trent Sisley all 3 times I've seen him with this group, the 2 open practices and the game the 1 open practice and the 2 games, rather, that we've seen out here. He's a freshman who's never looked out of place on the floor with much more experienced, much more sort of, at the college level anyway, much more credentialed teammates. He has never looked overwhelmed. He's never looked young. He's always looked like he belonged, like he was comfortable. It is easy for me at this point to imagine him having a meaningful role early on in his college career. Tucker DeVries, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 turnovers, 2 steals, 2 blocks. He's only 2 of 10 from the floor. Both of his makes were threes, and then he hit a few 4 free throws as well. What I will say about Tucker DeVries is he gets involved in everything. And when you saw his numbers at Drake, and you saw his numbers obviously in an abbreviated stint at West Virginia, you could expect some of that, but you're never sure, and this is true of a lot of these guys, you're never sure when the bulk of a player's resume is at the mid-major level. Are they scoring, rebounding, assisting, blocking shots, whatever, because they're just so multifaceted, or are they doing it because that's what their team needs them to do at a lower level of competition? Obviously, I think DeVries will want to be better than 2 of 10 from the floor, but he was as involved, as active. He was getting on the ball. He was driving the pace. He was rebounding. He set a tone. He was one of the Hoosiers that set a real tone, along with the likes of Josiah Miles defensively during that comeback. He is so he feels like, and again, this is early days, this is all early impressions, but through these 2 games, he's felt like one of those players that you're almost always going to feel like he's involved in the game, whether he's scoring or not. And I think that's very valuable for a team that's trying to figure out roles for other guys. If you've got, a player at the sort of the top of the rotation that does not feel like he needs to be scoring, seeing a shot go in, feeling good to play well, that's very, very valuable. Alexa Ristich, wrote something on him that's already at IndyStar.com this morning. Continue to be impressed by him. He's kind of gotten thrown in the deep end here. I don't remember how many minutes he how many minutes he played on Wednesday night, but he played 24 and a half on Saturday because of the foul trouble at guard, and he never really looked out of place. Again, one of the better plus-minus numbers on the team. He had 5 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. I think he's got a good 3-point shot. It comes out smooth. The mechanics are good. Darian DeVries admitted afterward that there have been moments in these first 2 games when DeVries has shouted out play calls and then had to remember in the moment that Ristich doesn't know them because he's only been around this team. I think he's basically been around for right about a week at this point. And so Indiana is still comfortably taking it slow with Ristich. But he has never looked overwhelmed by the pace of the game. He's shown poise. He made a 3 last night, kind of in the midst of that run that felt really important, that kind of gave Indiana another lift, another boost. There's a player there, I think, and what that looks like long term, I don't know. You do remember he's an older freshman, and obviously he's I think he spent 3 years playing kind of at the pro level in Serbia, where he's from. So he's used to playing with older players, and I think that's something that probably helps him with that, that comfort level, that being able to manage the pace of the game, not being put off by certain physical challenges and things. But I wouldn't be stunned if, as he gets more time with this staff, with this team, Ristich becomes a more valuable piece for Indiana this year and certainly moving forward, because right now, we don't know what Jason Drake's status is. Indiana needs guard depth, and Ristich has provided that here in some, even if he hasn't necessarily scored in big numbers, has provided that here in some very meaningful ways. And then last but not least, Ian Stevens, who played in both of these games. The only healthy walk-on, Jordan Rayford, is injured right now. We don't sort of know his long-term status, but Stevens, listen, if you're Indiana, it's important to remember with guys like that, roster caps now mean that there are only going to be 15 players on the team. There's no sort of floating out to 16, 17, 18. Walk-ons are more important now, I would argue, than they've ever been, because you are allowed so few of them, because your opportunity to add walk-ons is so limited. And if you're Ian Stevens, you look at this trip and you say Jason Drake is out, Nick Dorn is out, Jordan Rayford is out. That's 3 of your 15 and 2 of your 13 scholarship players. Of course, a third, Andrej Simovic, the Bosnian center, is not with the team yet. So the point is, it doesn't take a lot for Indiana to get down to a place where Stevens needs to be ready. And I think, it's valuable for him to get run in these games and just get minutes on the floor with his teammates in case you get to that place. So that's kind of, that went on a little longer than I wanted to. But again, I know that fans are curious about who these guys are, what their strengths are, what they've looked like out here, because of course Indiana fans aren't going to see a lot of these players in any meaningful way before the season starts. That, you know, maybe a preseason game in October, that kind of thing. But just wanted to kind of, you know, sort of repeat over what I did through those first 2 games and sort of the immediate aftermath, just to give people a similar sense of sort of just like first blush evaluations, basically, of this roster as it's constructed and as it's available out here in Puerto Rico. So one more game here tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Again, my understanding is that Indiana will play that game and then just head to the airport. So don't be shocked if that's, you know, kind of the exhibition game to beat all exhibition games. I think Indiana will probably feel like this was a successful preseason tour from the start of practice in June all the way through, you know, now, kind of no matter what happens in that last game, so long as nobody gets hurt, of course. We will be there for that. We will have all the usuals, your immediate reaction, your live blog, post-game insider, pre-game video, post-game video, all those kinds of things. I want to say a big thank you for tracking us and following us throughout these last few days. It's been a lot of fun. It's been interesting, and there's still one more game to go, but we wouldn't be able to do it without people paying attention and people, you know, tuning in and coming online and reading what we're writing and watching what we're producing. So thank you for that. And please, as ever, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll have more of this from Puerto Rico, and certainly more of this as we move deeper into, I shouldn't say basketball season because it's going to kind of pause here, but as we approach football season, once everybody is back in Indiana. For the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. We'll talk to you soon.